What is going on, everybody? We've got the NFC North 2019 NFL draft grades here, talking about who made the best picks value-wise, got the best players, made the best picks to help these teams moving forward. A reminder, please hit that like button. It's the easiest way to support the channel. And hang around here if you're not subscribing to my channel. We're going to have a marathon of these picks coming out really in the next, I would say, 12 to 18 hours, hoping to have all these grades, every pick in the 2019 NFL draft graded. So let's get into it here. The Chicago Bears, important to keep in mind that they did trade their first pick here for Khalil Mack. So that factors in here. Obviously, you also got to pay Khalil Mack about $22 million. So it's not a head-on A+, but that trade itself was a straight heist from the Raiders because they got a second-round back for also giving up a first next year, which if the Bears are good again, that's a difference of like 10 picks. So just an absolute steal to get Khalil Mack for the 24th pick in the draft. We saw the impact he had on this team. And then they also traded the second pick in this draft last year to move up and get Anthony Miller. I like that move at the time, and it's a wait-and-see approach. You know, I think if the Bears had an actual quarterback that can develop talent and throw an accurate football, Anthony Miller could have had a much better rookie season. I do think he's going to continue to develop and be worth that second pick, but the Bears only 5 picks in this draft, only 2 in the first 5 rounds, so we kind of knew heading in that they weren't going to get a whole lot out of this draft, but they did get an impact, frankly, potential star in David Montgomery here, halfback out of Iowa State. So they traded away Jordan Howard, and I kind of applauded this team for that because Howard, while he's a very good between the tackles runner and he's had multiple, Pro Bowl 1,000+ yard seasons, that was a little bit of window dressing considering when he was on the field, the other teams knew that you weren't passing the ball, or at least that you weren't throwing him the football because he just wasn't a weapon at all as a receiver. So David Montgomery is a more or less Jordan Howard with an added feature of being a receiving back. He also has more shiftiness than Jordan Howard, but not an elite athlete. My comparison for him is James Conner, who we later learned with Pittsburgh that he has a versatile skill set. So I think this is a great pick for the Bears. He should be a highly desired fantasy rookie. I would expect him to have no less than 800 yards. We know they want to run the ball because throwing is going to hurt this team in the long run. If they're going to have success, they got to run the ball better and continue to play that elite defense. And then Riley Ridley in the 4th round. This was just too good of a player for them to pass up. My number 2 wide receiver, which was always a bit of a hot take. So he falls here to the 4th round. I had a feeling he might fall to the late 2nd, 3rd round, but as he gets here into the 4th round, given the depth in this wide receiver class, the Bears just could not pass up on the talent. Now, he might not start right away. He could. He's going to compete. But, I see him as a guy that's going to learn from Allen Robinson, a guy that said in the past that he wants to be a wide receiver coach, Allen Robinson. Riley Ridley has those similar quick feet, rare quick feet and release at the line of scrimmage for a bigger wide receiver. And I think there's only 2 years left on that Robinson deal. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was a 3-year contract. So for a team that is going to have cap troubles down the road, if they do choose to pay Trubisky, then Riley Ridley can step in for Allen Robinson as that number 1 profile wide receiver. I think that's a really good pick looking for the future a little bit here for the Bears, and the value is too good to pass up. And then we got Duke Shelley. As we said in the last draft grades of the West, some of these players just weren't even on my draft board. I had over 400 players I evaluated before the pre-draft, but it's almost impossible to know every player that's going to get drafted. These teams are pulling from pools of 2,500 plus players. So when I get these players, I basically always go C because I just don't know a ton about them. I haven't watched the film yet. So we're going to go C, get some cornerback depth here that I do think they need. I don't think Prince Amukamara is the long-term answer there. Kareth White was a backup at FAU, but did look good when he was in there. So they have a deep running back room there. And then they grabbed Steven Denmark out of Valdosta State, another corner that was not on my board, so we'll go C there as well. Overall, the Bears are going to get a B+ here. 2 really good picks to start off there. You factor in as well the fact that Khalil Mack was an asset acquired here, but the draft as a whole probably not going to change the course of the Bears season. That team pretty much more or less was what it's going to be before the draft this weekend. So then we've got Detroit. They took TJ Hawkinson with the 8th overall pick. Really great player, and yes, as some people have pointed out, if you knew you were getting Gronk, if you knew you were getting Travis Kelce, yeah, you would take him in the top 10. And Hockenson, possibly the best tight end prospect we've had in that time. So, I don't hate the pick. We're giving it a B, but that's not really how the draft works. The history has told us that top 15 tight end does not end up being worth it. I don't think we've had a top 15 tight end end up becoming Gronk or Travis Kelce. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen with Hockenson. Detroit seems to think they can make it work. It's a much-needed weapon for them. So I liked the pick. I just didn't absolutely love it enough to give it an A. And then their second pick here, I honestly think was one of the most head-scratching bad picks in the entire draft, especially if you factor in my own evaluation of a Blake Cashman who did fall to like the 5th round for injury concerns, so I get that. But Jahlani Tavai, my 40th ranked linebacker, a bit oversized at 6'2", 250. There's no lying about the fact that Matt Patricia just wants to replicate the Belichickian way. All he's done is, take Patriot-type players, try to replicate the same type of players, and value the same positions that Bill Belichick does. And I'm not denying that that's a good idea, because Bill Belichick is the best general manager in the history of the NFL and understands player value more than anyone. But that is hard to replicate. So Jahlani Tavai here, they're trying to replicate Jawan Bentley, who was like a 5th or a 6th round pick for the Patriots last year, considered by modern thinkers to be, quote unquote, oversized, just like Jahlani Tavai. Now, Tavai is athletic at his size, but I do not think anyone was going to take him before the 4th round. And if you miss him, I don't think he's an irreplaceable prospect. So, he could be Jawan Bentley and surprise some people with his coverage instincts and, really turn into a nice player. But to me, this is kind of an eyesore on the rest of this draft, where there was really good value in guys like maybe Grady Williams or, in my opinion, Blake Cashman. Other linebackers I think would have been better, like Jermaine Pratt. Could have grabbed a guy like Andy Isabella, an elite, speedy wide receiver threat for that big arm Matthew Stafford, even like a DK Metcalf. A lot of options I think would have been a hell of a lot better than Jahlani Tavai, but they see something in him that I clearly do not. So we'll see how that pans out. Then we got Will Harris, safety out of Boston College. Nice player. I thought this was a touch early, but I didn't hate it. I would have much preferred to have gone Deontay Thompson here. I just think the upside is higher there. So we're going to give this pick a C. Then we got Austin Bryant. This pick gets a B. I think this is a great fit. When we broke down Rashawn Gary to Detroit pre-draft, a lot of things you can say the same thing about Austin Bryant. He has that, this is more evidence that Patricia wants to replicate the Belichickian scheme here, because you got defensive end for them is always like 6'4", 270 plus, big guys who are more often than not come into the league better run defenders and then find a way to rush the passer, but are more about gap control and keeping things in front of them. And that's Austin Bryant in a nutshell. Perfect fit here. I think he will start for this team, which is rare to find in the 4th round, at least on 1st and 2nd down for this team. So good pick there, Austin Bryant. I don't love him as a prospect, but a great scheme fit here. And then Amani Oruwariye. Now, some shades of Christian Campbell, who I absolutely loved out of Penn State, had a 2nd round grade on, just as I did. Amani Oruwariye has that prototypical size. Could have actually been a fear factor for teams, because teams do look at where you're coming from, the program, the coaching that you've been given does say a little bit about the type of player you're going to be when you get to the NFL. So I do think there was a fear factor there. That might be why he fell. He is a very similar player to Christian Campbell, who isn't on an NFL roster right now. So I still like the upside for Amani Oruwariye. A lot of people had 1st round grades on this player, so the upside here just too good to pass up. They need another corner. I still would have taken Greedy over Tavai in the 2nd, but you at least made up for it potentially here. He could very well start on the number 2 corner spot for this team. And then 6th round, Travis Fulgham. Dominated at Old Dominion. I kind of liked his game. Obviously couldn't get a deep film breakdown of him from Old Dominion, so decent pick there. They do need some more weapons. Ty Johnson out of Maryland, whatever. I loved the Isaac Nata pick here, so you double down on tight end now. Nata was actually on my sleepers list, but as I talked about him, he's a dominant run blocker, physical player, young guy, more athletic than you would expect. Never going to be an elite receiving threat, but now you have TJ Hawkinson to be that number one tight end. I love Nata and what he's going to do for this run game. I expect a lot of 2 tight end sets in Detroit this year. I think they also signed Jesse James, so they've got a pretty good tight end room right now. And then they take PJ Johnson out of Arizona for some D-line depth there. So we're going to go with a C+ for Detroit. I like the Hawkinson pick. The upside of Oruwariye is nice. Nata is going to be a potential 5 to 7 year player on that roster as a role player. And Austin Bryant, I think, fits that scheme perfectly. So you get some nice players. I think they didn't always capitalize on value, so we're going to give them a C+. I don't know if this draft really changed the scope of the organization, but it wasn't a bad draft. So then we got Green Bay. So the Rashawn Gary pick at number 12. Gonna get a B just because I think he is a bit redundant with the Smith brothers that they just paid a bunch of money to in free agency as a couple power rushers. They also already have 2 deep on interior defensive lines, so you're going to have to kind of craft a role for him. Mike Pettin has a very multiple scheme and definitely likes the versatility he's going to bring as an absolute freak athlete. He's some bit of a cross between like Brandon Graham and Jadeveon Clowney, a guy that a lot of people hated because of lack of production. Definitely doesn't scare me. The last time he played a full season, he was top 10 in hurries and had like 6.5, 7 sacks or something like that. So production not a worry for me with Rashawn Gary. Really smart, young dude. If he lacks any tenacity, I do trust the guys that they have around him to kind of bring it out of him. So I do think this was a good landing spot. Not necessarily a huge need for Green Bay, but the upside here for Rashawn Gary I think was too much to pass up, and the value was there for me as he was the number 8 player on my board. And then the trade up for Darnell Savage at 21, I thought was an excellent move. Savage, a guy that was collecting fastly, high first round grades, or at least, sure first round grades. They say there's about, 14 to 20 first round picks, true first round picks in every draft. A lot of teams, reportedly, believed in Savage as that guy. So Green Bay passed a bunch of teams to try and get him. They gave up a couple 4th round picks to do that, but Savage is going to be that kind of playmaker that they've lacked in the secondary. They now have a safer guy in Adrian Amos. Jair Alexander looks like a lockdown corner. Still waiting to kind of see what you're going to get from Josh Jackson and Kevin King, but Savage hopefully can plug right in there and be that kind of playmaker in the second level there as kind of that, slot corner, strong safety type. And he does have a ton of range. He could play some free safety, but I like him most kind of in hook zones, curl flats, man-to-man coverage on out routes, crossing routes, using that speed and athleticism to jump routes, and that's something Green Bay's really lacked. And then they took Elgton Jenkins in the 2nd round. I loved this pick. I thought Green Bay had to walk out of the top, their 3 top 50 picks with a guard and a offensive playmaker. So they get the guard here in Elgton Jenkins. Corey Linsley going to stay at center. He's too good there to move him anywhere, but Jenkins clearly athletic enough to play guard. I had a 1st to a 2nd round grade on him, very talented player, and I thought the value was excellent here in the middle of the 2nd. And that offensive line's looking really nice. When they signed Billy Turner, I kind of said, okay, you're going to start him or use him as that 6th man swing piece who can plug in at guard or tackle, where I think he belongs. And now this pick is going to allow you to do that with Billy Turner, who can play guard or tackle. So you now have depth and talent on that offensive line. And then with their 3rd pick, they do get that offensive playmaker, Jay Sternberger. I thought the value was excellent here. Sternberger was our 4th tight end, 2nd to a 3rd round grade. So this is right in his sweet spot. My comparison for him is Hayden Hurst, just an athletic, big-bodied dude, decent blocker, but needs to improve there. I wouldn't be surprised if he beats out Jimmy Graham, who was pretty bad last year. And then day 3 was pretty underwhelming for Green Bay. Kingsley Keke is a really athletic, developmental guy. They have a lot of depth there on D-line, so he is definitely a nice athlete to bring in. It's a good time to kind of bring a guy like this in, because you do have Mike Daniels still there, who has done a great job, helping coach up and inspire some tenacity in these guys. So if you can get that out of Kiki, he really does have elite athleticism. So that's a pretty solid pick there. And then they take Kadar Holman, was not on my board, had to look him up. He's a 25-year-old, kind of really athletic, lengthy guy. They must have felt like he could come in and be your cornerback 4 and maybe play in the event of an injury, because he is a more experienced guy. And then they grab Dexter Williams, really athletic running back. If anything happens to Aaron Jones, which it seems inevitable because he does have injury history, I like Jamal Williams, but he really doesn't have that home run threat ability. Dexter Williams could offer a nice 1-2 punch with Jamal Williams if anything happens to Aaron Jones, who should be this team's feature back next year. And then you grab Ty Summers, kind of a stiff straight line runner out of TCU. I see him as just kind of a special teams guy. I thought that pick was just okay. So Green Bay's going to get a B+. I really liked their first 4 picks, but I did think they kind of did a bad job. I thought this team needed one more receiver for Aaron Rodgers. I think the depth chart there at wide receiver is kind of a joke right now for Green Bay. And then I did think they need another corner and another running back. They did address it, so we'll see how those players turned out, but I didn't necessarily love what they ended up with. I did like it. So then lastly, the Minnesota Vikings, a ton of picks to run through here. We're going to try and pick up the pace here. But Garrett Bradbury, awesome pick. Uber athletic stud center. Needed to upgrade on the interior there. I think he will start at center because the young Ohio State guy, I can't think of his name right now, really struggled last year. And then we got Irv Smith, fantastic pick in the second round. Now, I actually had Jay Sternberger ranked ahead of him, but I think in Minnesota, Irv's a great fit. His big criticism was he doesn't block, but he is a really good athlete. Well, I actually think he's a better blocker than Kyle Rudolph, who just kind of stands there. So even if Irv Smith's not a good blocker, I think he will be an improvement in that regard. But he also is just a much better athlete. And if I'm the Vikings, I'm probably cutting Kyle Rudolph to clear some cap space, because I know they're butting right up against the cap right now. Then they grab Alexander Madison, running back out of Boise State. I know a lot of people like him. I didn't really see it. A little rich for kind of a dime a dozen running back, in my opinion. So I didn't love this pick, but that's fine. They did need another running back. Drew Samia, a guard out of Oklahoma in the 4th. Really good pick. He could very well end up starting for this team. Just an experienced pass blocker out of Oklahoma. Increase that depth. I thought that was a fantastic pick. And then they grabbed Cameron Smith. Good, smart, average athlete out of USC. Going to be a nice, reliable 4th linebacker for that team in the event of an injury. He can come on the field and play if they need him, and offers a long-term replacement for Ben Gideon as their kind of base linebacker, more of a run defender. And you might try and see if he can be a better coverage guy and eventually maybe even move on from Anthony Barr. And then they grab Armon Watts out of Arkansas. Up to this point, I was a little confused why the Vikings had not taken an interior defensive lineman, but I think they found excellent value in Armon Watts here in the 6th round. Had a 5th to a 7th round grade on him. Pretty explosive, powerful dude. Had a fantastic season. Kind of a breakout year in Arkansas. So he could be a one-year wonder, or you could be getting a steal here in Armon Watts. And then Marcus Epps, a safety out of Wyoming. I believe that's where Andrew Sendejo came from. I could be wrong there. So they might be trying to develop him, replicate what they had going there. Ola Sameka Udo, project athletic tackle. Again, a good pick here, because I was kind of saying at this point, why haven't the Vikings grabbed a tackle yet, considering they have 2 guys, but if anything happened, they'd be kind of left out to dry. So I do like grabbing a tackle here. Then you grab Chris Boyd. This pick is one of my favorites, at least on day 3. So I had in my notes that he reminds me so much of Holton Hill, who this team picked up as a priority free agent out of Texas last year. Holton Hill, not elite long speed, but like absurdly quick feet for a bigger corner. And Chris Boyd has the same exact traits. He's almost the same player. He's a little thicker, which you actually like. But I think the Vikings got an absolute steal here. We saw what they did with Holton Hill with Zimmer's so good at coaching up those corners. I thought this was an excellent pick, and that cornerback room is going to be really, really, competitive and dominant this year. So I thought that was an excellent pick. Chris Boyd, who I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on. Then Dylan Mitchell, wide receiver out of Oregon. BC Johnson, wide receiver out of Colorado State. I liked both of these picks a lot. I actually like BC Johnson a little better. He separates really well. Somewhat similar actually to Deontay Johnson out of Toledo, who I loved that pick for the Steelers. But this team needed wide receiver depth, and I'm not going to complain with BC Johnson and Dylan Mitchell as their 3rd and 4th wide receivers. I think these guys can make an impact, come in and, get open, especially with how much attention that Thielen and Diggs are going to bring. So I think these 2 wide receivers are going to really compete and could be really surprising impacts in their first season here. If one of these guys or the collection of them ended up with 60 catches for, 600,000 yards or so and offered a good weapon for Kirk Cousins, would not surprise me. Between those 2 and Irv Smith, I think you got some much needed help for Kirk Cousins at really good costs. And then 736, they grabbed a long snapper, no comment. So A for the Vikings, close to an A+. The only reason it's not an A+ is because I don't know if they got superstar out of this draft. You really got to, get a superstar, in my opinion, to get an A+. But the amount of picks they had, the amount of depth and talent and needs that they addressed, I was really impressed with this Vikings draft. This team has had a couple disappointing drafts in a row, but I thought Chris Spielman did an excellent job here with this draft. So that's the NFC North. We're going to do the NFC South next. I think that's going to be the last video I put up tonight, and then we'll try to get the rest out tomorrow on Sunday. Again, please hit that like button. Cheers as always, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.